led there. I'm very passionate about leadership. And I think that as we're looking where we are globally, we can all agree that there is a leadership deficit. And so now it is important for us to figure out ways to engage the discussion on leadership and to see what it is we can do to cultivate the next generation of leaders. Um, so, the premise or the research behind leading while limping is before you can, I'm going to minimize this here. Okay, before you can attempt to fully comprehend the concept of leading with a limp, you have to learn how to distinguish the difference between authentic and artificial leadership. And we know that the working definitions are artificial leadership is leading in a style or a way that is not your own, and authentic leadership offers you the freedom to embrace your struggles and remanufacture them as tools to empower those who look to you for guidance who may be facing similar struggles. So the oh, I didn't mean to stop sharing like that. Okay. So the premise is basically that we're living in a society now where we are forced to deal with authentic versus artificial leadership. And leading while limping empowers leaders to be able to recognize that every leader has something that we struggle with. All of us have a limp, all of us have an impediment of some kind, or a struggle, or a challenge. And so, authentic leadership is finding a way to use that challenge point to be a strength. If we've all, I know we've all been engaged with strategic planning and SWOT analysis. So ultimately, to put it in a contextual frame of that mindset, authentic leadership is finding a way to take a challenge or a weakness and turn it into a strength. So, in teaching or engaging in the research of understanding what does that mean, two areas came about from qualitative research: dealing with the imposter syndrome, meaning leaders feel they have to be perfect and have to be available 24/7, or dealing with the transformation process from transforming from a manager to a leader, where being humble and sharing recognition, listening, and demonstrating the importance of supporting each other while also trying to figure out what that looks like transitioning from a manager to a leader. And the analogy that I use with the people while doing the qualitative interviewing is being a manager. Sometimes you're able to look at the lower level, but looking at it from a high level takes you into a higher phase of leadership where you're looking at the big picture. And so it really empowers the leader to be able to move from the window view to the big picture. And then it talked about leading self and others. A lot of the qualitative research, the persons who participated talked about the challenges that they were facing, how to make themselves a priority. You know, we're living in a time now more than ever, we have learned the reality and the importance of self care. So, making ourselves a priority while also making those who we serve a priority, listening carefully, understanding how to listen, getting used to listening, and leveraging mentorship. So, a lot of the responses came back that synthetic leadership was a lack of humility, a lack or inconsistent respect of others, and a lack of partnership. Authentic leadership came into view with viewing employees as colleagues, not subordinates per se, practicing self-awareness, meaning the leader is has the ability to do regular self-checks, self-check-ins, or introspective looks, make showing appreciation a habit, humility, humility, humility. That was actually a quote from someone on a survey. Humility, 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 because now we're living in a phase where most people, when the question is asked, whether we are experiencing a hedge of synthetic leadership or authentic leadership, the answer is going to sadly be synthetic. And so, leading while limping came out of a quest to ensure that we would move from a place of synthetic leadership, but a place to authentic leadership. Talked about serving while you lead. The feedback that came was listening, responding, engaging, asking, and caring. A concept that kind of is interwoven in the book is being an aspirin. And there's actually a chapter in the book that talks about being an aspirin to someone while having a migraine of your own, because that's what leadership is. Setting aside time to practice mindfulness, genuinely listening when employees are sharing their problems, and allowing everyone to take five. I think the presentation that talked about emotional intelligence and the intelligence piece was powerful, because now we have seen in all facets of leadership and even all facets of business and management and in some social and a great amount of social science research, we've seen the importance and the rise of emotional intelligence. There are actually institutions now that are offering graduate credentials, degree, and certifications or graduate certificates in emotional intelligence and emotionally intelligent leadership. Book also talks about managing employees through personal crisis. These are some of the tenets that came out of the research: availability, not prying, listening first, then suggest. A lot of times we want to suggest and then listen. Know what we can offer and be realistic in that. Check in regularly. Consider people's workloads. Be consistent and transparent. And then we looked at servant leadership. As we all know, servant leadership came about in 1978 with Robert Greenlee. He did the baseline impactful work on servant leadership. And he basically talked about empathy, listening skills, encouragement, and selflessness. Could you imagine what a world we would be in if every leader practiced these attributes? Empathy, putting ourselves in others' shoes, maybe not always being able to understand it, but at least attempting. Listening skills, encouragement, and selflessness. The book also talks about leading, not lording, and dealing with microaggressions and micromanaging, leading with trust, ensuring that there are clear objectives, being open to feedback, offering honest and consistent communication. Again, these are the tenets that came out of the qualitative research that empowered the book to be created. Looking at the attributes of micromanagers, these were spot on: avoiding delegation, involving themselves in employees' work, consistently wanting updates and status reports. My favorite one was expecting to be CC'd into every email, consistently complaining and never being satisfied, discouraging independent decision making and diminishing initiative and creativity, and failing to pass on knowledge and skills. And in fact, there is great amount of research now that shows that there are going to be significant knowledge gaps. Our colleague talked about AI replacing some of the positions, but there's perceivably going to be a substantial knowledge gap because many managers are not taking on the attributes of being a leader, and they're purposely not passing on knowledge and skills. Book talks about combating micromanaging, understanding why they micromanage, and then seeing what they can do to change it. This is from the leadership's point of view: building trust, sharing feelings about starting the discussion, setting realistic expectations and healthy boundaries. Psychological safety is something as another aspect of leadership and management that has come about as a rise in the last couple of years. Industrial psychology and other programs are created to kind of speak to those. Being consistent in communication and offering a two-way feedback. We also talked about leadership in uncertain times. The pandemic showed us what leadership had to look like in a very uncertain time: mindfulness, foundation, and consistency. The pandemic was a time where all of us were in a space where we didn't know, but it was those impactful leaders that were able to help people find where they were going, even when no one really knew. And all we knew was, well, we had to go somewhere. We just didn't know where, because we didn't know what the world was going to look like. Some strategies that came about in the book: distinguishing between the complex and the complicated, letting go of perfectionism, embracing the unease of not knowing, resisting the quick fixes, and avoiding doing it alone. These are some common mistakes that the research showed that leaders make when facing crisis: attempting to control the situation, failing to step back and see the big picture. Talked about that earlier. Lack of communication, lack of transparency. I will tell you, as a leader, I've learned over the years, sometimes not knowing is the best answer because it's the honest one. And so the book empowers leaders to be able to find their voice, to be strong enough to be able to say that. Also talked about inclusive leadership and some of the responses that came back from the research. It eliminates judgment, introduces the roundtable discussions, implements growth discussions, it encourages positive responses, takes notes, and follows up on ideas. All these are tenets woven into the book. The qualities of inclusive leaders: self awareness, exceptional communication, open mindedness, commitment, team spirit, courage, cultural intelligence. Again, there comes that cultural slash emotional intelligence. And these are all tenets that came from the qualitative work that was done to the book prior to the book. And I thank you for your time this morning. And I will open it up now, Professor, if you will go ahead and open it up for questions and we can engage. I'd love to hear some thoughts and comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I request each and everyone to give the big hand to Dr. Brown for such an incredible presentation in this RAMAS 2025.